Welcome into a special edition of Inside Carolina's press coverage. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. That is Evan Rogers, a regular on press coverage in the middle. Um, they always like to say intern Evan, whatever. You're part of the team, Evan. I don't consider you any lesser because you have hair and you're younger. So we're good there. And of course, folks that are familiar with Inside Carolina know that's Rob Harrington, at least on the other side of the screen for me. It's on my right. I don't know what it looks like on TV. But Rob, of course, famous for being Inside Carolina basketball analyst and was on the post game. I guess the Memphis post game was the first one we did where we set records for post game folks in the chat for an exhibition game. So it bodes well for the season. Let's get right into it, fellas. And Rob, since you're new to press coverage and a guest here, I'll let you start. You've had time to marinate on Carolina's start, and there's plenty more time to marinate before they head to Hawaii or play the first Hawaii game. But just give me sort of your overall thoughts on what you've seen versus what you expected so far this season.
I'd say for the most part, the season is tracking about how I thought it would. Other than the fact that, of course, RJ Davis isn't playing as well as we might have expected. And some of the other guys have stepped up, I think, even beyond. Seth Trimble, we had some foreshadowing from the summer and how well he was playing. But I think otherwise, if you look at the one loss at Kansas, it was a competitive loss. It looked like it wasn't going to be competitive. But the way they fought back in that game, the way they've overcome some rough starts, had some ugly first half performances, and then turned it around. I mean, they show a lot of explosive potential. I think right now it's tracking as a top 10 offense. I think they have the potential once Davis comes around and the roles continue to fall into place to become a nationally elite top 5 offense. And that ultimately will be the identity of the team.
I agree there. I don't think offense will be a problem this year, but Evan, your thoughts here before we dig into a couple of Hubert Davis quotes to keep it on the press coverage tilt. Just opening thoughts, maybe contrast, compare, whatever, agree with Rob, disagree, whatever you want to do here.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with a lot of what Rob was talking about with the offense being the identity of this team. I think one thing that's really taken me aback is just how fast they really can go. I mean, they talked about it a lot during the media days, during the preseason of wanting the tempo to be ramped up even more from that of last season. And I think people have been able to see during stretches this team can really get out and run and really thrive in the open court. I think something that you're going to see develop over the course of the season and especially on this road trip out to Hawaii is how this team figures out what to do in the half court and establishing those roles and the spacing that's needed to be successful in the half court. Because I think that's where you've seen maybe some of those scoring droughts happen, during the early parts of the season is when they're forced to play in the half court. And it's something that is going to take time. And I think once they figure out that part of their offense, it's like Rob said, I think one that could be, nationally top 5, even if higher than that.
Yeah, that's a key factor, especially as seasons grind on. You have to be able to grind in the half court to have success, especially come tournament time. But we had the opportunity to Hubert Davis on, I guess it was on Monday. Today's Tuesday, so yesterday. And Hubert was asked what they work on consistently. I want to play that clip for everybody.
The first thing that I've talked about is consistency in terms of discipline and details. We have shown signs of playing great defense and being efficient on the offensive end, and it's about starting there and staying at that level, and you just have to do it. And so building habits, consistency, playing at that elite level, defensively, rebounding, taking care of the basketball, and dominating points in the paint. And so those are things that we talk about daily, and those are things not just in regards to this upcoming week or week and a half, but for the whole year. That's just going to be important for us, just tightening the screws on the discipline and details and diving into that.
Rob, I'll get to you here on this. First of all, Hubert Davis, that was the first comment of the press conference. He got his discipline and details checked off, one of his key words that he has used the entire time he's been at Carolina. But I'm going to push back a little bit to you guys on the offensive end. Yes, I think there will be an upper elite offense when it all gets going and RJ gets rolling. But I think defense is where this team has to win ball games because shots aren't going to fall all the time. Rob, what do you think of what Hubert was talking about there and then that defensive angle?
Well, I mean, of course, you're right. Those are sort of standard issue Hubert Davis comments. But I think as they apply to this team, I think where it will translate onto the court is how they rebound, because they're going to have to team rebound this year more than when they had Armando Bacot those other years to sort of single-handedly control the defensive glass for them. And then the other thing is mentioned is how they handle overall defense. And mostly what I'm thinking about is how they defend screen and roll with such a small set of guards. If indeed the starting lineup continues to be Cadeau, Davis, and Trimble, how do they not get flattened by a lot of screen and rolls, especially when you don't have a big guy behind you who's really a rim protector? The attention to details in that instance is how to fight through those screens to not just get taken out of the play and become too easy to score against. So far, they've had mixed success with that. I wouldn't say it's been the most promising start defensively. I think the offense has been so explosive at times it's easy to overlook it. On the other hand, you can't completely dismiss the second half against Kansas when they looked at minimum like a competent defensive team against an elite opponent on their home court and any home court. I mean, at Allen Fieldhouse. It was very impressive to me, and I thought you could take away, we don't like to talk about moral victories, but I think when you're starting to see those fine details come to fruition a little bit earlier maybe than you would have thought, even though defensively certainly they're a long way from where they'll have to be, to your point, Tommy, to win big.
Yeah, Evan, rebounding, discipline, details, it all comes back to toughness on the boards. It's funny, when Jalen Washington was out there, Adam asked a great question about the screen and roll, and I asked the pick and pop question and all that. I guess for me, on this tilt is defending that. When you put Jalen Washington, they spun Bacot left and right over the last couple of years in screen and rolls, and Carolina had a hard time defending it until they finally figured out a way to do it. On the defensive end, how does this team handle those type situations? Is Jalen Washington a guy that can do that? It's the one part of the team that makes me nervous watching them. Are they going to be susceptible to good offenses? Because when they get to Maui, I mean, it is absolutely stacked.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, it's a loaded field. We were talking yesterday. I mean, there's going to be, at least right now, there's 3 teams that are ranked in the top 5 in the Maui field. I mean, it is loaded of really good teams. I mean, the defensive concerns are there for Jalen Washington, and I don't think it's not something that you can necessarily see flipped, here midseason. He's not going to become physically an Armando Bacot. That's just not who he is. I think one area this team has seen some defensive growth is really, and I know we're going to hit on him later, but it's the play of Elliot Cadeau. You're seeing him be more active both in the passing lanes and on the ball, and that's something that, as a freshman, at times you saw him get disinterested, might be too harsh, but there were just freshman moments there in the defensive end. And I think you're seeing now, if Elliot can be a disruptor along with Seth, those are 2 guys, who are going to be involved, obviously guarding the ball in those pick and roll situations. I think if you can be disruptive enough at the point of that attack, that's maybe where you can hide or cover up some of those deficiencies that Jalen Washington has. And at the end of the day, Jalen Washington, though he's not going to be a good defender, of a back-to-back traditional big, he still has the length, the athleticism, the reach that Armando Bacot simply just didn't have, and some of those big men that UNC have had in the past haven't had. So I think there are some parts of his game that you can use to a defensive advantage, but it is something that I think this team is still trying to figure out, and it's going to be a process that's going to take probably a couple weeks into the month of this season.
I want to dig into Elliot Cadeau, but Rob, I wanted to ask you this question. You've watched a ton of basketball. Sort of explain the difference in a team that has an elite big defender versus a team that has to do it by community effort back there. Because I think this Carolina team, 100%, is going to have to be a community or a quote unquote team effort in the paint. They did well against Kansas, out rebounded Kansas. I would have bet my life savings that wouldn't have happened, and it did happen. But how does Carolina manage to be that interior force? Not singularly, but as a group, Rob?
Definitely having a true rim protector in the back enables you to be much more versatile defensively because you can take more chances out top. You can gamble more for steals because you have this coverage behind you. Obviously, the big guy can cover for other people's mistakes. So I think to the extent that Hubert Davis might have wanted to just turn the temperature up one half notch this year on turnovers, because so far under his tenure, the Tar Heels haven't been forcing many turnovers, and this year it will be difficult to do that. Even though I think just playing off those guards, it should improve some naturally. They're going to have a more conservative scheme because when they get beaten on dribble penetration, they're a little soft in the back as well. So for that reason, they have to be better with contain. They have to be more conservative about leaving guys in the interior. I think they'll have to potentially even double down more than they would have intended. And I think the net result will drive everyone crazy. I've been saying this all summer and fall. I think you're going to see some open threes they give up this year that will look more like the Roy Williams teams. They don't really want to give those up, but they're going to have to choose between giving up probably too many high percentage shots against better opponents versus having to give up some threes and just hoping the other team misses some.
I agree with that. Let's check out. Well, let me do this. Let me talk about Johnny T-shirt, johnnytshirt.com, our sponsors. I hear Joey make these great segues into this. I can't do it. I just say, I just do this. Johnny T-shirt's the best place to get Carolina swag. It's the best place for Inside Carolina people to support our sponsors. And it's the best place for you to get discounts because you're an Inside Carolina premium subscriber. Go to johnnytshirt.com. URL's at the bottom. If you can't get to Franklin Street, if you're in Chapel Hill, go see them. They're great people to deal with. And the store's just amazing with all the stuff they pack in there, from jerseys, hats, sweatshirts. It's that time of year. Scarves. If you like stickers for your cooler, they got all that kind of stuff. Christmas ornaments, everything you need at Johnny T-shirt. Books. It's amazing what they pack into that store. And then online, you can get them to ship it to your house. So check out Johnny T-shirt. And Inside Carolina Premium people get 10% off your order. All right. Hubert Davis. I think the man loves Elliot Cadeau. And as well he should. Evan, we asked him about it on Monday. And here's what he had to say about Elliot's growth.
Well, first of all, I'm not the type of coach of, he's the one that controls the offense. He's the one that gets everybody involved. I've said a number of times, the more playmakers that we have on the floor, that's good news for us. And so we have a number of playmakers, RJ, Seth, Elliott, Drake, a number of guys that have the ability to make plays. And so that's really beneficial for us. But the play of Elliott, I'm just really happy and proud of. I was saying to my wife the other day, that's one of the best parts about this job is seeing guys grow and continue to, not just grow off the court, but also their growth on the court. And just to be able to see the difference in level of confidence and awareness out there on the floor of Elliott is really fun to see, and it's fun to be a part of, and I'm just really proud of him.
That's, for me, that's the cool thing about the way Carolina does it a little bit different than other teams do it. And this is a soapbox thing. I was watching a couple ACC teams play, and there's like two guys on the roster that you recognize because they're all different. And I understand Carolina's got plenty of different people. But, Rob, I'll bring you in on Elliot Cadeau's growth. This is a young man who last year you could clearly see the talent. He's an amazing basketball player, but he struggled with the mental side of the game. He struggled with not being the best. And if I'm speaking for him, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, but it felt like to me he struggled with not being the best player on the court at all times, which a lot of freshmen do. He had trouble with fouls and dealing with the foul aspect and all. But this year he's a completely different player. And he looks completely different. And that growth, Dean Smith always said, from freshman to sophomore leap, that leap was the biggest leap. Rob, it's fascinating. We're 3 games in, 5 if you count the exhibitions, 6 if you count the blue-white. But he is completely different than what we saw last year, and so much better and more improved. And regardless of what Hubert Davis says, and I think you agree with me, Rob, it's his team, and he runs the show. And rightfully so.
I thought that Hubert's comments were interesting. He's going to have to finesse this issue at least for half the season because every game that Cadeau seems to step into this alpha role, which you and I have discussed previously, and the more that RJ Davis becomes the 1B or even the number 2, that's a question that's going to come up at every single press conference. Certainly as they play the national non-conference teams, people will want to talk about it. How are you managing RJ's ego? How are you managing the dynamic between the two? Even though I don't anticipate there being a big problem, he's going to have some polished answer to devote attention to it. I don't think there's any question that the team has responded more so far to Cadeau, and it's very early, and I expect RJ Davis to start scoring a whole lot more than he has been because he's getting incredible looks. He's benefiting from Cadeau's emergence in some ways, and he's just not getting, I think, as much action directed his way as it was the case last year. But I think he will be fine. Even so, the team is just so much more responsive to Cadeau, and the way that I think he's the one who will unlock the potential of the front court. He's already finding Jalen Washington and Lubin in ways. I think he's the only player in the team who can do that. So to the extent that Carolina is more balanced this year, I think it will have to come through Cadeau. Even though I give credit to RJ Davis so far because he is getting more assists. He's making the most of his touches as always. He doesn't turn the ball over. But there's just a difference between them as playmakers, and there's no denying that. And I think as Cadeau has improved as a scorer and his overall, as Hubert Davis said, his awareness has improved so much. Sort of like if you're playing an EA sports game and you recruit a player and their awareness is at a 68, and you're like, what difference does it make? And then 2 years later, they're at an 85, and they just happen to be a lot better. So somehow I think that also applies here. So Cadeau, if he was a 68 last year, maybe he's a 79 now, but you see it.
Yeah, and I love this picture right here, and it's our thumbnail. If folks are looking at that, that kid finds joy as much in his success as he does in others. Just a great photo, and of course, there's other versions of that. Evan, something else that I find interesting is that in the locker room post games, talking to Cadeau, he's a different person there as well. But just sort of build off Rob's point here is that, I mean, college basketball is always full of a bunch of alphas, but some emerge, and the dynamic of having, like Rob said, RJ Davis being the one with a bullet, even last year with Armando. I think, they shared it a little bit. Neither one of them overly vocal, but Cadeau's sort of emergence, I think it helps RJ, but I also think RJ's gravity helps Cadeau do a lot of the things he's able to do because of that fear that RJ Davis can go nuts if we let off of him. And so it opens it up for Elliott as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to a preseason basketball press coverage episode we had. I think someone said that Elliott Cadeau would be the X factor on this team. If anyone wants to go back and rewatch that episode, I think they'll figure out who that was.
I think somebody else said he did not need to start.
That's right. I forgot about that. But no, I mean, I think what you're seeing from Elliott Cadeau, aside from just the whole freshman to sophomore leap that, everyone has heard before time and time again, is I think he looks a lot stronger. He claims he hasn't put on weight necessarily, that he's added muscle, but he is sitting at the same weight. Just from my eyes, he looks stronger, and he's always had really good change of pace and understanding how to burst when needed and blow by people. But his body control once he gets in the air has been a lot better this year, and his decisiveness when he drives to the bucket or when he gets to the paint and throws a lob or kicks it out, he's just even more decisive than he was last year. And it was already at a pretty high clip as a freshman. And I think what you're seeing is a player who right now, and again, we're 3 games into the season, but he's playing at an all-ACC level. He's playing at a first-team all-ACC level even, I could argue. I mean, we're talking about a guy who's averaging over 15 points, 7 assists, and 2 steals a game. Now, are those numbers going to hold throughout the whole season? Probably not. I mean, that's, we're 3 games in. You've got a lot more data that's going to come in and factor into those numbers. But it's a guy that, helps this offense in general. Like you said, RJ Davis, though he's not shooting well, especially in that American game, there were a number of looks that were essentially layups for him last year that he just didn't knock down. And I expect those, to be knocked down, especially this coming week. I know we're going to hit on it later in the show, but the Lahaina Center and the Maui Invitational, everyone talks about it being a shooter's gym, whether it's the soft rims, but another thing that can help shooters get out of a slump in that gym is the depth perception of the gym. I mean, this is a legitimate, like almost high school like size gym. And some people probably saw it during the NBA bubble during COVID, and how you had players shooting at an extremely high clip in the NBA bubble. And they all talked about the depth perception of the back walls of where they were playing when you're not in these massive arenas, and how that factored in. So I think that's something that people could see this upcoming week with RJ Davis. But as far as Elliott concerned, this is a guy who's clearly taken the leap. From a vocal standpoint, I agree with you, Tommy. He's still not, I would say, the most articulate quote you're ever going to find, but he's also, much better than what he was last season. And I think on the court, you're seeing a little bit more of that vocal leadership. And it's something in the development of this team that I think everyone was a little hesitant last year, because, the shooting was off. And there were times like in the Alabama game where you had to take Elliott out entirely. But I think, people are seeing this kid has legitimately made a sizable jump this offseason.
Absolutely. And, it's a great point. These guys, but I wonder how well they could shoot with a rim that's like tilted sideways with a chain net and a pothole in front of it, like we grew up playing on. Going to take a second. I'm going to talk about Congruity. Matt at congruityhr.com. Go to them for your small to mid-sized business needs. They've got everything you could possibly want to grow your small business. Everybody talks about local and shop local and do this. Well, Congruity was a local company that's now blown into a national company because their ability to do what you need them to do for your small to mid-sized business. Email Matt at congruityhr.com to get that assessment. National guys to pay the bills. It's press coverage with Evan, Rob, and Tommy. Okay, guys, we're back. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put the bracket on the screen. If I can figure it out, we're going to talk about the Maui here. Bear with me, folks. Great radio. We got it right there. All right, looking at this bracket, and you guys can see it. And if you're on a big screen, folks can see it. Rob, we can talk about it looking at it. You got Memphis and UConn, which obviously Carolina played Memphis. They're a tough, scrappy team. UConn's probably one of the best in the country. You got Colorado and Michigan State. But where it really gets ridiculous is the bottom half of the bracket here with Auburn, Iowa State, Dayton, and North Carolina. Rob, you followed the Maui for a long time. You followed this stuff for a long time. It's about as stacked as it gets for an early season tournament. The battle for the Atlantis always gets it. The Maui always gets it. But that side of the bracket there with 3 in the top 10, and then you have Dayton, everybody is aware of Dayton. That is potential Final Four-ish type bracket here in Thanksgiving week in November, Rob.
And I think this is sort of an off-key comment because everyone's going to talk about the elite opponents. I think Dayton is sneakily one of the most important non-conference games of the season. Reason being, because the second game will be very difficult, even if they lose to Dayton. If they were to lose that first game, they might even be favored to lose the second game. And even if they won the third game, it would be a terrible 1-2 weekend, probably with one end over the worst team in the field. So I think they need to get into that winner's bracket, because if they beat Dayton, even if they lost the next 2, at least you'd have one quality win for the weekend, and it would give them something to build. Certainly, I wouldn't call 1-2 a success in any event, but I would love to see them get past that first game, and then hopefully win at least one of the next 2. I don't think there's any team in there they could not beat. I don't think there's a 2024 UConn. Not in this bracket, maybe not at all. And so I expect them to be competitive against anyone. Again, I mean, if you can go to Allen Fieldhouse and take Kansas to the wire, they should be able to go toe-to-toe with any of these teams on a neutral floor, certainly with the amount of big game experience they now have. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm expecting them to play well. I won't be here making excuses for them if they lose or finding silver linings in it. I think this is one where they need to perform. We know that the ACC is down as it has been the past few years. They've got to rack up some resume boosting wins, and this is the week to do it.
I agree there. Evan, get in here on this. Melinda in the chat was asking about the bracket. You can see here, Carolina plays at 11:30 p.m. And then if they win, they stay late. If they lose, then you start getting earlier in the day. And I think the championship game itself is at 5 p.m. On Wednesday. But Evan, to Rob's point, and I think it's a great one, and it's a lot of people overlook it. It is, and Greg Barnes loves to talk about the net and all this kind of stuff. Tournaments like this are resumes because you're not going to get. I mean, Carolina gets Alabama. Carolina plays a ridiculously hard schedule, but you got to win some of those games. And if they can get to the championship game, they will have beaten two quality teams. And that bodes well for seeding purposes and all that stuff down the line. It maybe more so than it ever has. It seems like every year it gets more and more important to win, not only play tough games, but actually win them. They've got the opportunity here, Evan. What do you think about these brackets?
Yeah, I mean, it's stacked. And, I think everyone understands the type of program Dayton is. Obviously, a tournament team last year. They had an NBA draft pick on their team in Holmes, who's obviously gone. But if you look at KenPom right now, and I understand some of the rankings within KenPom is still based upon that preseason ranking he releases that's based off, past year data. But Dayton would be ranked 4th in the ACC per KenPom. The only teams ranked higher than Dayton in the ACC are UNC, Duke, and Pittsburgh. So Dayton's higher than Wake Forest, Miami, and Clemson right now in KenPom. This is a legitimate test that I think, some people understand who Dayton is, but this is a game that UNC could lose very well, and it's an important game in this kind of bracket. I think something that could potentially help UNC. I don't know how much of an effect it will have, but I do think playing that game against Hawaii before this tournament starts does help you kind of get acclimated to the time difference and just the 5-hour jump back, I guess, that you're making. The only other team in this tournament field that plays a game in one of those Western time zones before this is Memphis. They play at San Francisco before they go out to Maui. Every other team is playing a home game before they fly out there to Maui. But I mean, this tournament field, the thing that I do like about it for North Carolina's purposes, some people might see the bottom of that bracket and see that it's pretty loaded compared to the top, aside from UConn, obviously. But I like that for UNC. I think it's important for them to be guaranteed a top 5 matchup against, a team in the top 5. I think it's important to get those early tests in, and, you got to win the games at some point. And like you said, Tommy, the net rankings, when those come out, are largely based upon your performance in the non-conference slate. And once that first edition of the net is created, that's the baseline. And you kind of see it with the college football playoff in a way. Once that baseline is set, that can really play out how the rest of the season is kind of foretold. So this is a very important tournament for UNC. It's one that they're going to be challenged from the first game on. I know people aren't too thrilled about the late nights that are trending. I know it says 11:30 p.m. there Eastern time. I'm going to probably get some people more upset. It's probably going to be even later than that, because with how these tournaments go, it's probably going to be closer to 11:45, maybe even 11:50. But this is a great opportunity for a team that has a lot of new pieces trying to play together. And I think this kind of field, the success that UNC could potentially have in this field, is where that game at Allen Fieldhouse really does help in getting that first big time test out of the way, so that you can see, how this team kind of responds and reacts in some of the games that they're going to be playing.
Rob, I'm going to drop the curtain of that and get your final thoughts on the Maui. Evan, you're going to stick around. We're going to talk football briefly. But, Rob, I want to get your final thoughts here. For you, what we talked about, they don't need to go 1-2. They need to go at least 2-1, whatever. How does that happen for this North Carolina team to have success, not only in the win column, but sort of building on the Kansas game and the 3-0 start and all, or excuse me, the 2-1 start going into beyond this? They've got Hawaii on Friday night / Saturday morning at 12:30 a.m. And all these late games, but they've got a job to do. One question that was interesting to Hubert, and I had it in my pocket, and then somebody else asked it, is how do you sort of blend the business trip aspect of it to the life experience aspect of it. And these young men get this experience. Jalen Washington talked about never even going to the beach until they went to the Outer Banks a couple of years ago, and now you're out in Hawaii. But business trip wise, Rob, what has to happen for North Carolina for you to say they had a successful trip?
I think they have to get 2 quality wins, however that happens. So Dayton is one of the 2. And then whether it's winning the semifinal and making the championship game, or if they fall after that, then picking up a second win. And they would need some, it would depend on how the brackets fall too. But I think they need 2 quality wins. Two wins that you look at and say, okay, good win, without getting into any of the quad stuff. I don't want to deal with any of that yet. But just on paper, and you intuitively look at the team, it's a pretty good team they beat. They need 2 of those because they have started out okay. Of course, they don't have any wins like that yet. They already will have some pressure, I think, to beat Alabama at home. But think about that later for the next week. 2 quality wins, and I'm good. It would be great to get 3, but I wouldn't hold that as the bar to success at this point. I think 2 would be great. Anything less than that is a disappointment. Without looking for any excuses, I think they need to perform. They need to get 2.
There it is, Rob Harrington. He'll join me on some of the post games, just so folks, before I drop out and switch to football briefly. So we can't do a post game after a Friday night game at 12:30 a.m. We could. I can stay up. I can take a nap, and I can stay up late. But what we're going to do, and folks, if you're listening, and Sean Crawley, I know you watch everything we do, so listen to the schedule here. Dewey Burke and I are going to come together on Saturday at 11 a.m. our time, after Inside Carolina Live from 9 till 11, ahead of the Boston College game. We're going to get in the middle of that sandwich, that 1 hour sandwich, and we're going to talk Carolina basketball with Dewey Burke, talk about the Hawaii game. And then next week during the Maui, Rob and I are going to do some late night post games, and we'll go from there. So if Carolina wins, get your espresso, drink your coffee, whatever. We'll be going 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, perhaps. Rob, you said you would, so you're in, buddy.
I'm a hardcore Gen Xer. Let's do it.
All right, so you might have to carry the shows, but we will be doing post games after the Maui games, no matter when they are played. So stay tuned to Inside Carolina for that. Rob, I'm gonna let you drop out, man. I appreciate you taking the time on a Tuesday night. We'll talk soon, my friend.
Thanks so much. Good seeing you guys.
Take it easy. All right, Evan, you and me, buddy. Let's see if I can get this right. No, I don't like that one either. I don't like that. We're too close together. That's too big. What about right there? All right. Last little few minutes of this show, I listened to Josh Harris. He's an incredibly cool dude, man.
He is. He really is.
He is a monster of a man. He's about to have his 3rd child. And, I like where he basically said, been there, done that, when you guys were asking him, or Evan and all them, Adam and all them, and AJ with his list of questions. But you heard from Criswell, you heard from Marcus Allen, and also Copenhaver. I am amazed, Evan, at the difference in how these press conferences go after wins versus losses. You say, well, duh. But, I mean, the difference.
I mean, after some losses, we don't even get them.
Oh, yeah. It is just say we're not coming out.
So, yeah.
That's all you. You said that. I did not say that. Quite frankly, I had washed that from my memory. But, yeah, these guys, the coaches, whether it's Collins, whether it's Lindsey, Mack even, Mack's usually pretty much the same regardless. He does get a little irritated easier if they lose. But the players – it's good stuff when they win. I don't know how much is good when they lose, but anyway, your thoughts today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a team that sounds like they've won 3 in a row. I mean, they seem to be confident. I think this game this weekend is going to be particularly interesting because you've seen in this win streak and really throughout the entire season, UNC somehow has played better on the road than at home. Even in the Duke collapse, which that was at the end of that game. I mean, you were up 17-0 in that game. So this team has played pretty well on the road, and they're going up against the Boston College team that they're making, a big deal about Bill O'Brien and the pro style offense and the NFL background that he has. And that sure is, all and well, and it's definitely a factor. At the end of the day, you're going to play a team whose starting quarterback quit on the team last weekend before their game last week. And yes, they had a good outing against SMU. How much of that is maybe the team chemistry of that thing happening and maybe it coming back to earth this weekend? I don't know. But at the end of the day, the quarterback that they're going to be going up against in Grayson James, I think if I'm saying his name right, is a transfer from Florida International University. And he's a little bit better of a passer than Castellanos, but he can't run. And I remember when everyone saw Boston College early in the season, the Florida State game, when they went to Missouri, and you saw Castellanos running wild. Everyone probably saw this game at the end of the year, and they're like, here we go again, because UNC obviously doesn't have a good history with the running quarterback. Now they don't have to go up against that guy. And it's a totally different team. It's a team that likes to run the ball a lot. And it's a huge opportunity for UNC to continue the good vibes that they've clearly established going into, obviously, the big one at the end of the season.
Yeah, a couple questions in the chat, and I'll see if I can knock them out. Sean Crawley, what's the weather in Boston? It's supposed to be like 50 degrees and sunny, isn't it?
Yeah, just today, some of the weather apps say 40% chance of rain, but the weather is going to be around, in the mid 40s to 50 degrees by kickoff. So about the same temperature that it was at the game last weekend at the night game.
If it rains, though, boy.
Yeah.
And this is Evan is not going to Hawaii. Evan is going to Boston.
I will be up in Boston. The intern budget does not extend past 5 time zones, unfortunately. But Adam and Jeremiah will be doing some great work out in Hawaii, having a great trip. But I'm very excited for this weekend. Boston is a great city. I've been before. I'm super excited to go again. But I have not been to Boston College, so I am very excited for that experience.
Are you going by yourself?
I'm not.
I see dime. I hear you, brother. Work it. It's a work trip. Remember that. Do me a favor.
Always.
I need a cooler sticker while you're up there.
Okay, I got you.
And Michael Daniels, does Carolina have the next head coach on staff? Yeah, they have a head coach right now. Evan, how many? If you had money, if you had money for every time somebody asks you what's going to happen, would you have a better intern budget?
I probably wouldn't have to pursue a full-time job. No, it's so interesting to me because I understand the part of the fan base that is either upset or just wants something to move on. But at the end of the day, and we've been over this a bunch, if UNC does end up going 8-4, 9-4, if you want to count a bowl, whatever you want to do there, that's better than what it's been around here for a pretty long time. And from what we understand and people that, we know close, within the program, Mack Brown is a guy that came back to UNC with the vision of wanting to fix UNC. And until he feels that it is fixed, I don't see him stepping down. And I don't think it would do UNC good in the long term to force out a coach who just went 8-4 for won 8 games or more for 3 straight years. I think that could actually be detrimental in the long term. Some people think just getting a new coach is going to be a fix-all solution. That might not be the case if you burn bridges with the guy on the way out. So until Mack, if Mack beats State, wins the bowl game, and comes to Bubba and whoever, up in the big wigs suite after the season and says, I want to call it a career, then that happens. But I don't see a world where if UNC season does end with a good trajectory, that the people up in charge go to Mack and essentially say, let's have a mutual agreement of a resignation. I don't.
Yep, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting few weeks. I mean, you've got signing day coming up, December 4th, which, by the way, noon dish, Don Callahan and myself will get together tomorrow at noon to talk about recruiting. You got a lot going on in the portal and all this, and I understand the need that some people have for the blood, for blood or whatever. But sometimes you got to be careful with what's around the corner because it's not always a unicorn. It might be a bull coming straight at you. So last question for you, Evan, before we get out of here. It's been press coverage, been a different version of it. As like Evan said, Adam and Jeremiah prepare to go to the islands. This is a great question, and I think I don't know if we can understate this one. How much has Josh Harris helped with Travis Shaw's development? We know about Ted Monachino. We know Adam's scoop article from the game, filled with a ton of information there. But you talking about player-led teams, Josh Harris has done as much for Travis Shaw, at least from what we see and what we've heard, as any human being has. Evan, your thoughts there before we get out?
Yeah, I really want to plug that scoop that Adam gave. That's another perk of being a premium member of Inside Carolina. You get the great information about how Josh Harris has helped Travis and the conversations that Monachino had with Shaw over the offseason. Josh Harris, from even way back in training camp, I remember his name coming up across a lot of the defensive linemen, and that was kind of surprising because that was a group that across the D-line you have a Kevin Hester, a Ritzy, Des Evans, a Rucker. I mean, we're talking about guys who've been within the program for 4+ years, and they're talking about a guy like Josh Harris and how important he has been to not only Travis Shaw, but just the defensive line in general. And I think you're finally seeing that. I mean, this is, Travis Shaw is coming off the best game of his college career, undoubtedly. There's no, denying that. I mean, PFF supports that, and the eye test supports that. And a big part of that has been Josh Harris. Someone really close with the football team was like, I wish we could have had him all 5 years. And obviously, we know how that recruiting went down, and you only get to have him for 1 year. But he is definitely someone that has been vital in the maturity of Travis. Mack likes to talk about the 40 pounds that Travis lost during the offseason, the maturity from a physical standpoint, and more importantly, even from a mental standpoint. And you're really seeing that play out this season for him.
Absolutely. Josh Harris, obviously, if folks don't remember, he was part of that massive D-line class that several of those guys went to NC State rather than North Carolina. I think if Mack Brown would have been there a little bit earlier, some of those guys would have come to Carolina. But anyway, he goes to NC State. He plays for however many years, goes to Ole Miss, and then transfers back to North Carolina. And has had glowing things to say about North Carolina's program in comparison with those two as well. But yeah, just a super mature young man. If you have not listened to his interview today, it's up on Inside Carolina's YouTube channel, same channel you're watching this. Go check it out. It's a fascinating listen. And players listen to guys their age probably more than they listen to grown-ups sometimes. And this is an example where a guy that's been there and done it has certainly helped Travis Shaw, and ultimately can help Travis Shaw make a lot of money one day and change lives, not only his own, but his family's. And Josh Harris should get a fair amount of credit for that. That's Evan Rogers. I'm Tommy Ashley. It's been press coverage. Like I said, noon dish tomorrow, the game plan Thursday night. Evan, when you leaving for Boston?
Fly up Friday morning.
Friday morning, Evan will be in Boston covering that game. Inside Carolina Live, 9 to 11. Post-game basketball, 11. I mean, there's just so much going on at Inside Carolina. Stick with us. If you're not a subscriber to this YouTube channel, do it now. Everybody take care and be safe. Appreciate it, Evan.